GrokTalk.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at gerardatlarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
3, 2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of GrokTalk, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GraniteGrok.com. We are your feared extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
GrokTalk.
Welcome back to GrokTalk, brought to you by GraniteGrok.com, the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers, coming to you live streamed every week and podcasted after from our beautiful studios here in Concord, New Hampshire. It's an office in the middle of a bunch of offices, up some scary stairs and to the right. It didn't used to be that scary. Now there's a tattoo shop next door, but I don't know if that...
Pins and needles.
Pins and needles. Anyway... welcome back. Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope you're enjoying the program. Our next guest is Darlene Pawlik, who has had an interesting life, and I'm going to just kind of lead with that because, I mean, your official title is, Educational Trust Foundation Chair for New Hampshire Right to Life, correct?
Yes, and
okay.
I also chair the PAC.
Okay, and I'm going to turn the music down so I can hear you. Now, I could read this, but it'll take a couple minutes and just tell us how you got here from where you started.
Where I started?
Well, it's right here in your bio, and just pick the relevant bits. And most people wouldn't even, I mean, if you read this, most people would be like, I mean, that's not a normal, most people's lives don't start that way.
They don't start that way. Most people aren't conceived in a violent rape, which I was, and I learned about that when I was really young. And that gave me a sense of being worth less than others, and so I ended up being a target of human trafficking at 13. I was sold on my 14th birthday for the first time, and I was sold for a few years and finally ended up being sold to a small-time organized crime boss as a house pet. Mm-hmm. And he told me that if I didn't have an abortion, he would kill me. And I was really sure he would for numerous reasons, but I ended up having a supernatural dream of an abortion procedure from inside the womb perspective. And I say it was supernatural because there's no way I knew about it in the reality of my world then. But now I've been a nurse for 26 years, and I can tell you it was quite accurate. But anyway, I was able to fake an abortion that day. I went out with him for dinner that evening and was able, because of the dream and the emotion that it stirred up, pretend to have had an abortion, and he let me go. So I had my baby, and I went on. I had 4 more babies, and I married a wonderful man. And I did not share any of that part of my life for a long, long time, although I was active in pro-life ministry for the last 22 years. I advocated for the lives of others without exposing my own life, mostly because I didn't want my children to be thinking about those things. It hurt me when I was little, so I didn't want that to be what was in their minds. Anyway, where I am now is chair of the Political Action Committee. And what I heard in the last segment was that you said that your vote was an endorsement. And New Hampshire Right to Life has a long policy of not endorsing. They were supporting candidates for a long time because they had a no exceptions policy for endorsements. So there weren't that many, and they just decided, well, let's not endorse. And I took that bull by the horns, to use your expression, and I said, well, no, I want to endorse people. So I sent out affirmation forms that came with a packet of information expounding on what the affirmation really meant, that they would be pro-life with no exceptions, not for rape or incest or disability, not by the way that they were conceived or any other such thing. And I got 54 responses, 54 affirmation statements back. But
wow.
Yeah, sounds good.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm surprised. And how many did you send out?
Oh, 1,000. Yeah.
You
All
know-
of the candidates got them.
You know something? 54 out of 1,000 doesn't sound like a whole lot, but that's far more than I thought you might have gotten. Far more.
Yeah, it was a great response. However, my secretary and former chair, Bill Smith, also sent out surveys. The surveys are a little bit more detailed. There are questions that they answer. And so on the surveys that came back, 20 of the people who signed the affirmation statements had either questions or had answered it incorrectly on the surveys. So I had to call them. And the responses were interesting because a couple of people were like, well, one in particular said, oh, I'm pro-life, with all the usual exceptions, health of the mother, rape, incest, you know. And I went, what's left? If we're talking about abortion, I mean,
Right,
obviously,
yeah.
you can be pro-life at the end of life, and that's great. But if we're talking about abortion, what else is there?
Well, you know, and sometimes it can be a hard decision. You know, I am pro-life. I struggle with some of the early stuff. And I have to admit to you, and I say this to everybody when the topic comes up, when it was time for both of my sons to be born, I looked at the doctor and said, if a decision has to be made, save my wife. I don't consider that anti-life towards the baby, but it also means my love for my wife at that time. It was a hard decision, and I had to make a choice. And, of course, the typical thing is that the mother says, no, save the baby, don't save me. And generally it's a rough time in a couple's life. Which you're pro-life, but which life should you save? Did any of that come up in any of the discussions or on the surveys or anything like that?
Absolutely. On the affirmation statement, it simply says that the doctor has 2 patients. Now, if he loses one, he loses one.
Okay.
Where our focus is just that he has 2 patients, or she has 2 patients. That's a female doctor, obviously.
Oh, you don't want to get in trouble for that.
No, I don't want to get in trouble for
Walking on
that.
the eggshells.
We are not PC.
No, we're not.
Trust me.
Totally not.
And if somebody wants to accuse us of not being politically correct, we grin.
We don't care about that stuff. But anyway, yeah, it's been I wasn't always a pro-life person, and I didn't pay a lot of attention to politics. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. Those were topics you didn't discuss because you didn't know how to discuss them, you know. But then I learned how to discuss them. And I write stuff all the time just to try to make people think about abortion in a different way. You know, because we have the typical arguments and the typical debates, and I'm not involved in the entire movement, but, you know, I pay attention to it. So you always look for another angle. You know, people are like, well, when does life begin? I said, well, I don't know. When did your life begin? 30? 45? I mean, or did it begin sometime sooner? And what would you call everything that happened from conception to now? Is that your life? Or is it something that just wasn't a life until some arbitrary point you just picked for political convenience? You know, people don't think of it that way. You know, does life begin at conception? Well, where else would it begin? Is there a point after that where it starts? Duh. You know, but people have been trained not to think that way. They've been trained to run away from it. You know, and that's hard to deal with. A lot of people don't even want to talk about it.
There's a lot of young people that have been influenced by the concepts of Dr. Singer that even up to 2 years old, your life hasn't begun.
Yeah, that's something we were talked about early in the show, how much we bookmark ahead of time, and we never get to some of that stuff. And one of those exactly is the trend among a lot of millennials, college-age kids, who are more and more starting to say, abortion? There's nothing wrong with post-birth abortion,
Right.
and sometimes even up to 7 years old. And I look at this and go, what is our value of life? And now I believe that life begins at conception. There are a lot of progressives, the pro-choice, who believe anytime before that baby's born, it's not a life. It's not sustainable. Well, yeah, guess what? After birth, that baby's still not sustainable and won't be sustainable for a few years until it can take care of itself in the most rudimentary ways, like, can I get food to my mouth? You know, and all of that stuff. they do have a conscience. We see the studies, the biological studies. They feel pain. They think. They react at far earlier times than what we ever thought before. Again, another thing we talk about all the time, the science is never settled. We find out more and more about this. But I look at these millennials going, I can't believe what you're thinking, that post-birth it's okay to just kill a living being. At that point, there is no trying to scrub it away. This baby is alive. And that's where the Gosnell trials out of Philadelphia kind of went. And, thankfully, that was taken care of, I think, in the right way.
There are more Gosnells, just so you know.
I'm quite sure, because there is no end to human depravity.
Exactly.
And there is no end to human self-justification to salve one's own wounds. And this is something that you probably run into far more than we do. We play in the political arena. You're at ground zero in this issue. And what do you run into?
We're finding at the other end of the spectrum there's an awful lot of this too, with the elderly and the infirm and those that have lost their cognitive abilities primarily are
Dementia.
very big targets, because that's what they're talking about is what's the criteria for life, and it has to be based on all these different ethical arguments, and one of them, of course, is that cognitive ability. Can you relate? And once you're beyond that, there are people who are considered post persons. Then now they're not people anymore.
Post persons.
Post persons.
I've not heard that phrase before.
Lovely.
That's Nazi Germany all over again.
Absolutely.
Subhuman. That's even worse than subhuman.
It is.
That's.
Right. Well, I was at the delegate convention, the Republican delegate convention, and when Mr. Stapleton brought up his amendment, I didn't think it was going anywhere. I didn't think the leadership would accept it. I didn't think that they would even put it to the floor. And when it passed, I was elated. And then within about 90 minutes, a couple of people, but Mr. Brown's staff in particular, came out and said, "Oh no, we don't think this is a good amendment. We're not going to abide by this." And it was that the preborn, and they called them pre in the document because pre means before instead of un, which means not. We've been using unborn for years and years and years, and it always kind of bothered me because then they can stay unborn, not born. But if we call them preborn, it just means before. It's like prepubescent, before puberty, whatever. It's an easier term that means what it says. And then the preborn have the rights and privileges according to the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. When Roe was decided, and Roe wouldn't even have been heard if it weren't for the fact that Norma said that she was raped. They wouldn't even have heard it. It was just not going to happen in Texas. But they employed a confused compassion that said, would you make this woman who's been raped carry this baby? It's a baby. So it's a confused compassion. We're going to kill the baby because a woman shouldn't have to carry the baby. It's a very temporary situation to be pregnant. Trust me, I've been pregnant. It doesn't last forever. It feels like forever, but it doesn't last forever.
I have 3 kids. He has 2. We're familiar with it. We're not women, but we were there.
Yes. Well, what we get is the flip side is that you never stop being a parent.
Right, but if the fact that the child is there is bothersome, there's always the adoption option. It's an option we can all live with, right?
Correct.
Okay, but I can't remember which justice it was, but in the decision, it specifically said if the right of this baby, this conceived human being, is conveyed according to the 14th Amendment, then abortion would be no more.
Correct.
Right. So that's what the Republican convention, and I haven't seen it on the website yet to see whether or not they've posted it.
Go to GrokTalk.com, and there's a series of posts by Mr. Murphy on why this hasn't happened yet. But
yeah, I've been watching. In fact, I'm way overdue.
Yeah, we're going to take a really quick break, and then we'll come back and maybe talk about that.
Yeah, we should.
Okay.
Few things are as important as finding the right doctor. And under Obamacare, that's harder than ever. Over a third of our hospitals no longer available. Our doctors no longer covered. Fewer choices, longer drives. No state has been harder hit than us. And even after watching it impact New Hampshire, Congresswoman Ann Custer still supports it. Call Ann Custer. Tell her Obamacare isn't working for New Hampshire.
Rock Talk.
All right, we are back with Darlene Pawlik from New Hampshire Right to Life and a whole bunch of other places, which we're going to talk about in a minute.
Yeah, we just learned about them.
But we were just going to touch on the platform. And before we segue off into skip bloggy world, we're going to go back to the platform because this is important, this issue. And it's not there yet.
It's not up yet.
No. So is it really there?
Is it really there?
Is
Well,
it-
according to the people who were there.
Is it pre-platform, maybe? Unplatform?
It's been in the news.
It has.
It's gotten around.
Yeah. Well, anybody who's been reading Granite Rock knows that I've been picking on the NHGOP because I walked out at that meeting. Right after the beginning point of order fiasco, I knew that the fix was in. I shouldn't have walked away knowing what was coming after, and I was so surprised. As I'm driving home back up to north of Concord, I keep getting all of these updates on my phone. The NHGOP is embarrassed by its base. The NHGOP doesn't like what the majority of its duly voted in delegates believe because they favor their own hand-picked candidates. That is the entire reason why that NHGOP platform hasn't been changed since 2012. And I've been keeping a running list every so often, and I'm overdue to put up the next edition of the update. Why isn't it updated? Well, that's because we'll give the Democrats more ammo against our politicians, specifically Havenbagger and Brown. There's a joke in there, trust me.
Let's not go too far afield, though.
Yeah.
Think if they do well in the election the next day, they'll post it?
No.
No? You don't think it'll ever show up?
It will be posted because by then, whether they win or lose, the whole purpose of hiding the changes, the preborn change in it, the largest one, it's taken the cultural issue off the table. And that's the whole thing. The GOP, the Democrats run on nothing but the cultural issues, and they don't the GOP doesn't understand what Andrew Breitbart said, that politics is downstream from culture. In other words, the politics is going to be defined by the culture, because you get into this mindset and outlook which makes it easier for those driving the politics to manipulate the culture. And if the GOP decides to abandon the culture field of battle, then they deserve to get what they want. Or rather, if they're going to put up candidates that don't want to get involved in the culture, then you've got all of the base going, why should I fight for a party that refuses to fight for my values?
Exactly.
And the other thing, too, is the gay marriage type stuff that's going on, the militant LGBTQRSTUV, whatever the initials are. I mean, we're seeing a good dose of that in Houston with the gay mayor there trying to
Let's not
put in
get
the
too
bathroom.
far off the field.
No, well,
talk about what
this
the
is
other
the
things-
ADD part that I warned you
I gotta
about.
Slow him down, or we'll waste the rest of your interview on that. So you're involved with more than New Hampshire Right to Life.
I am.
So tell us about these groups, what they do,
Okay.
what their focus is.
I am vice president of Save the One, which is an organization, it's national, an organization that is the hard case scenario of the pro-life movement. And when I say that, we are mostly men and women conceived by rape and or mothers by rape, and special needs or fetal anomaly, which is an easier way to understand it, the special needs babies. When a woman is diagnosed with, or
Like Down syndrome,
or
for instance.
suspected with any of those, the trisomy 13, 18, 21, and or even spina bifida, frequently, hydrocephalus, anencephalus, any of those fetal anomalies, they're automatically expected to want to have an abortion and to kill that baby before the baby is born. So we have a lot of special needs people that are joining our ranks now because we actually are officially a formed group this year, but we've been around for a couple of years. We've been down to the March for Life, and our speakers have been speaking all over the country. We have national and regional speakers. So we have about a dozen national speakers, and a few of us are international. So we go in other countries too. And then we have regional speakers. So there might be somebody in California who only speaks in California or in her area, and then New Mexico or whatever.
California's big. It's a region.
Yeah.
So what we talk about are those hard cases, and we go to political events, and we talk to legislators, we talk to committees about what it means to. Let's say that somebody's trying to introduce a rape exception to a bill. For example, when the 20-week ban was to be voted on, somebody introduced, and I think it was Eric Cantor, introduced a rape and incest exception. We would talk to those legislators and say, this is unacceptable. This baby isn't biologically any different from another baby. There's no way for you to be able to tell which of these was conceived in a violent act versus wine and roses. They're the same baby, biologically, physiologically. So why would you say that one is not worthy of being protected? Mm-hmm. And we talk about the confused compassion aspect of that, wherein this woman has been traumatized. She needs counseling. She needs help. She's going to have to get through this. But let's not compound her tragedy with another tragedy by forcing her, whether it's an actual force or a coercion by expectation that she'd want to have an abortion. Being in this movement, or this organization, I should say, I've met loads of women who've had their babies from rape, and actually, technically, I qualify because it was statutory rape, and in that situation, so I was willing to risk my life for my baby, and I know that a lot of other women feel the same way, and it's just something that we go out and share with legislators and with pro-lifers. My understanding is that about 60% of pro-lifers actually have exceptions. And so what we do is we talk with them about what it really means and what the logic of it, because it just defies logic. If there's a baby, there's either a baby worth protecting or there isn't. And yeah, we need to protect women too. The women that are going through abortions, so many times they'll come after I talk and they'll just cry on my shoulders. I had an abortion 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago.
Mike Rogers, who's normally here, he's not this week. We're at Karenet's fundraiser a week or so back, and they talk about that, what they do, post-abortion counseling, all these things that people don't think about. That here's a woman who's pregnant, and she's really upset, and she needs some guidance, and the only guidance she gets is from the culture and the people who are like, well, we can take care of this real quick, without really thinking about what it means to her later.
Is it a big impact of this, sort of the self-gratification, the instant gratification, the selfishness that our culture has become? Is this wrapped up all into that? I mean, we talked about the Casey Hickok, the Ebola lady up in Maine, and the funny headline was, the Ebola's Sandra Fluck. But, very self-centered and not willing to think of the other stuff. And is that a case of the person or the culture's impact on the person? Is it also a case of the impact of religion being denigrated by the popular culture so that you don't think about the higher order type processing? You talked about the logic, but you also have to think about the emotional stuff that the culture is applying onto that person, I would think.
Absolutely. And I would say that it's multifaceted. Partly, I don't know how much you guys watch TV, but the television's on at my work all the time. And I notice things that it just stunts the way we think. Movies, for example, would have a scene that's absolutely, completely unrealistic, but we don't think about it. We're in the movie and we're enjoying it, and so we don't think. We're not reaching the the dendrites, if you will, in our brains, we're not reaching those things which says, well, that's not logical. And they call it refrigerator logic when they produce these movies, because you don't think about it until you get up and go to the refrigerator. But I think we're at the point in our culture where this television is on so much that we don't think about it at all. We never even think about it. And so we don't reach those higher level places. In the schools, particularly, if we look at the public school system, same thing. They're not taught how to think anymore. Mm-hmm. They're just taught what to think a lot of times.
Yep.
We
agree.
That's huge. It's really huge. I actually homeschooled all 5 of my children through high school because I would not put them there in that situation. I only went to school to the 6th grade. I went to 7th grade for 2 months, and that's it. And I left school.
And you're a nurse.
I am a nurse. I went back to
you went back to school at some point.
I got my GED and I went to college. But the way that we're taught not to think, I think, is the biggest part of that. We have a stunted growth in that area. When you talk about the culture is largely created by the television. I was watching a movie with my young adult daughter the other day, and I said, "That's not real life." And she said, "Well, Mom, you know it is." And it was this hookup sort of generation stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, please don't believe that. It doesn't have to be real life.
See, that's where Andrew Breitbart said, the culture defines the politics. That is the message that they're trying to push. That is the politicization of your culture. Folks like us who believe in traditional values, I'm an evangelical Christian, our values are being deliberately fought against by what you see in the print media, the TV media, the music media, the film media, you name it. There are people who say we don't want that because, frankly, and I think it comes down to
30 seconds.
We don't want to be held accountable for our actions. So we're going to make everybody just like us.
All right, we're coming to the end of our fabulous segment, and I wish we could keep you longer, but we have another guest. How do people reach you? If they want to, the organizations that you know.
I'm contributing to 5 websites. Mm-hmm. So I am, if you can remember, NHRTL for New Hampshire Right to Life .org, NHRTL PAC for New Hampshire Right to Life Political Action Committee.org. I have my own website, which is thedarlingprincess.com. Save the one with the number 1. So it's the word save, the word the, obviously, and the number 1.com. And I'm also actually on the board of Personhood Alliance. So personhood.net.
She is busy.
I guess, yeah. And she has 5 kids.
They're all grown.
Oh, they're all grown.
Yeah, my baby's 18.
Oh, well, awesome.
Cool.
There, now that's why you have more time. That's why. All right, thank you so much for spending time with us, Darlene.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up next is Emily O'Neill, who is a write-in candidate, a Republican write-in candidate in Bedford. We're going to have her on the phone in a few minutes to talk about why she's a write-in candidate and the race and all that other stuff. Again, thank you so much, Darlene. We'll be right back. This is GrokTalk.
He tried to make us believe he was a fiscal conservative, but State Senator Jeb Bradley has been deceiving New Hampshire taxpayers. Like a wolf in sheep's clothing, he claimed to be one of us, pretending to blend in, but all along voting like a liberal Democrat. And oh, how he drooled at the opportunity to vote to expand Obamacare, which will result in higher taxes and longer wait times in the emergency room. And now, Senator Bradley is leading the charge to try and pass a Senate bill to prevent us from criticizing his vote. Call Senator Bradley at 603-569-4208 and tell him that we're on to his wolf in sheep's clothing routine. Tell him to stop pretending to be a fiscal conservative and start voting like one. Paid for by Citizens for a Strong New Hampshire.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at gerardatlarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is a repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning. You're listening to GrokTalk.